Hi there, and welcome to our Be Better book club on LinkedIn Live. So today we're going to be talking about 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. So if anybody is watching or watching on catch up or later on, then please do comment to let us know where you're joining from. And if you've got any questions, then please do ask them. So I am joined today by Rebecca, Alyson and Kate. And I'm Sarah Burgess and I'm a LinkedIn and career coach. So Alyson, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Sarah. Alyson Ainsworth, executive coach, facilitator, coach supervisor, and particular interest in the psychology side of well-being. Hence the interest in this book.
Excellent. And Kate?
Thanks, Sarah. My name's Kate Hughes. I'm the founder of Kate Hughes Meditation. I teach mindfulness meditation and in the workplace, and I'm also a transformative coach. As Alyson said, also quite interested in the psychology side of things.
Excellent. And Rebecca?
Yeah, hi, I'm Rebecca Wilson, and I do something completely different. I help businesses automate. So I help them work out what they should automate, how to automate it, and then integrate that automation. And obviously these days that means a lot of integrating AI as well.
Excellent. Okay, I'm just going to read a very short blurb. So I'm conscious it's probably going to cover the video of Kate and Rebecca for a second, but there you go. So this book, they've said it was instant Sunday Times bestseller, one of the Daily Telegraph's 75 best books of 2021. And the question there is, what if you stopped trying to do everything so that you could finally get around what counts? So I think that's quite a good intro, actually. And I know Rebecca highly recommended this book. She'd read it before. And I remember you saying, Rebecca, that you changed the way you worked because of it. Whereas other people I've spoken to have said they found it quite depressing and also slightly panicked about it. Yeah. So what do you think makes it one way or another? So let's go to you first, Rebecca. So what was it that made you recommend it, I guess?
Yeah, I would be really interested to hear the other. Yeah, no, certainly for me, what it talks about in its core is this kind of idea of stop assuming that you can do everything. Stop assuming that there is a world in which exists where your to-do list is always complete at the end of every week, month, year. You always achieve every single one of your goals. You always have a time for everything, and you are perfect, wife, friend, mother, sister, etc., worker and everything, because you've always done everything and what have you. And what it talks about is this idea of, rather than making the assumption that it is actually, there is this holy land you can reach where all of that stuff is complete, and here's the 50 million techniques that we can recommend to you to achieve that, it says, how about you just accept you can't? How about we accept, we remove that assumption and we accept actually we are finite as human beings. The 4,000 weeks refers to an average life expectancy is 4,000 weeks. That's the time you've got. So rather than being upset that we can't achieve everything, how about we flip it on its head and say, well, actually the parameters in which we're working are finite, and isn't that wonderful? And here's all the reasons why it's wonderful, and how you can use that information and say, brilliant, I can stop stressing, I can just focus on these things. And so that's how I switched my life. So after reading this book, and it was so interesting to reread it, that I sort of went, oh, brilliant. Like let's get rid of this humongous to-do list, and let's say what matters to me, and therefore focus on those things and accept messy as the end result as opposed to perfect, and accept incomplete as complete. And I'm glad I read it before I had a child, because I've been in big trouble if I hadn't. So for me, it shifted my mindset. And you guys both talked about, like in psychology, as I understand it, you change your mind, change your behaviors, right? Change your actions. And so I've just completely flipped on the head how I approach nearly everything as a result of reading this book. But definitely want to hear the people who are depressed, like how that comes about.
Yeah, I think that the people I've spoken to, it's more about the idea that most people live for 4,000 weeks, and I think they're maybe reading it at a point when they're in their late 50s and thinking, oh my God, I've not got much time left.
1,000 left. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's probably, and then sometimes that stops people from actually continuing. Because I think once you've got past that, what you've said makes a lot of sense. Actually, you've got to accept you can't do everything. And when he talks about people that have got bucket lists, and actually they're not even enjoying the thing they're doing at the moment because they're thinking, right, once I've done that, then I'll be doing this. So when he talks about being sort of present in the moment, doesn't he, and enjoying the things that you're doing and the simple things, and being at home in your garden and all of that kind of stuff, which you take for granted. So I think you need to push on. I think once you get past that, I haven't got long left, then it makes much more sense. What about you, Alyson? I know you found it a bit tough as well, didn't you?
Yeah, and I resonate with that beginning part. You know, but it is fact, isn't it? Life is depressingly short. And yeah, he talks about 4,000 weeks being if you live to 80, and you know, that's assuming you're going to do that. But when he does, like Rebecca said, it is that shift in mindset, that, you know, we accept that we can't always control everything. You know, I talk a lot about it in my career work. You know, what can you control? And in particular, we can't control time. You know, it will continue whether we like it or not. And working with Kate a lot, we talk a lot about living in the present and not in the future. You know, but a lot of my clients sort of say, oh, if I can just get to the weekend, or I can just get to the end of this month, you know, and they're almost wishing their lives away. And, you know, that what he then goes on to say is that sucks the joy out of everything. And he talks about that whole thing around, you know, joyless urgency that we've created. And I think, you know, for me, it was stepping back of that looking into that book, thinking, yes, we always think about maximum productivity and efficiency and busyness. You know, we wear busyness like a badge of honor. We talk about, you know, we put it out on social media how busy we've been. And Sarah and I were having a conversation before you joined about, you know, the weekend. Somebody just stole my weekend because I was busy all weekend. But actually, when you stop and you think about, you know, doing stuff in the moment, how much you can embrace that, and I can see, Rebecca, how you could say it would flip things on its head.
Yeah, and I guess it's hard to do that, isn't it, to flip things on its head, but things that are hard are generally worth doing, aren't they? So
yeah, it's about making some tough choices. You know, what do I focus on versus what do I need to let go of, or what am I going to neglect? You know, it's a great choice.
Even my Pilates teacher this morning, I went to Pilates class, and she was talking about the whole people almost don't want to say how old they are, but actually getting old is great because what's the alternative? So I suppose starting to look at it like that.
Yeah. But there was a guy this morning, and we were talking about change, and he said, you know, I've done 8 things on my to-do list, but there's 2 I haven't done, and I'm beating myself up. And I'm going, but bloody hell, you've done 8. So yeah. Really interesting of turning that whole thing.
Yeah. Kate, any thoughts on, did you find it depressing? Did you love it? Did you?
Well, when it dawned on me, exactly as you've described other people have said to you, and actually in my head, I was thinking, well, that's automatically 2,000 have gone. Now I'm sitting here thinking, actually, it's more than that. But I'm not going back down that rabbit hole. Quite significantly more than that, in fact. But I loved the whole flavour of the book, which is perhaps maybe not surprising. And a lot of what I'm, you know, talking about in my classes is very much along the lines of we can do anything, but not everything. And, you know, his approach to emails, you know, we can email each other backwards and forwards. I've actually stopped sending the extra email that isn't needed at the end, because I know that the other person just means it's adding to their email. We'd finished what we were talking about. It was all very pleasant. Let's move on, kind of thing. And yeah, just I've made some maybe more subtle shifts in my attitudes, I think, to the time that I've got and what I want to be doing in that time. Alyson, it's really interesting, the comment that you've made about we can't control time. And I love this concept of, remembering that the days of the week and what time it is completely a construct of man. And what if every day had the flavour of a Sunday? And actually, I think that very often. So that there's not this pressure of the Monday morning, which, okay, has gone since I stopped working in the full-time corporate job. But actually that any moment could be just as precious as that Sunday afternoon where you've got no plans or you're walking in the park. That's for any time. That's for now if we want it. And I really value that. I think in the introduction he said about time-saving devices and what are you saving your time for? Mm-hmm. And that really resonated with me. And I had stopped watching TV last summer and I'd gone back to watching a bit of TV in the winter and thinking, am I really batch cooking for my freezer so that I can go and put myself in front of a screen? Is that why I'm saving time? It really made me think about how I'm trying to be efficient is giving me the gift of time, and I'm just, distributing it up the wall.
Yeah, interesting.
He talks about an efficiency trap, doesn't it? He thinks because of modern technology, we need to have all the most efficient ways in terms of technology, the best microwave, the fastest broadband, all of the other things. But you're right, it's what you do with that time. And what do you think you should do? Because the more you do, the more you're expected to do.
Yeah, that's really true, isn't it? Definitely.
Arguably, you can control time in the sense of you can't control it in terms of physical hours passing on a clock. But when he talks about things like life is attention, so what you pay attention to is how you've lived your life. So in that sense, can I make today a memorable day? Did I do something today that I thought of a new idea, or I spoke to a new person, or I don't know, I spent time with my son, or, I watched him say a full sentence for the first time, which happened the other day. And so in that sense, that was a big day because of that little thing. And it wasn't just another Tuesday. Whereas I could quite easily just make all the Mondays, the Tuesdays, the Wednesdays, and the Thursdays just go. So in that sense, you do get to control how long your 4,000 weeks is by how you intentionally choose to spend them, just exactly to your point, Kate. Like, am I saving time to watch television? Or am I saving time on, we have to do our laundry, right? But we could save that time to then sit and have a conversation with someone, which is totally different, or go for a walk somewhere we don't know, or learn something, or read a book. So I think in that sense, you can control how you perceive time, and given that time is just a perception thing, maybe we can control it.
And Rebecca, as you're talking, again, I'm reminded of the fabulous book that you recommended to us a few book clubs ago, of The Unexpected Joy of Being Ordinary. It just dovetails perfectly. The fact that we don't have to do the big things. Yeah. And I think that it really coincided with Oliver Burkeman's message as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, it does. That's another book that really changed my life. For those who don't know, it's essentially about finding joy and pleasure in those tiny little things that happen. So like stapling a stapler, crunching leaves that are frozen and that noise it makes. Having an imaginary race against somebody walking down the street and they don't know you're racing them. All little things. There's like a couple of my examples, all little things like that, and if you choose to notice them, you have a good day. And or you can choose to just staple pieces of paper and not listen to the awesome noise that it makes. So yeah,
maybe we can talk about that book next time.
It's a good book. I'd love to read
it. No, that sounds really good. Cool. So was there a particular part or chapter or anything of the book? So I liked chapter 11, staying on the bus. I thought that was really good. Is there anyone that's got anything that's really stand out they want to talk about? Alyson?
I think, I mean, he talks about the art of settling, and when I was listening to you two talking about that whole thing about choice, you know, and feeling at peace with the choices we've made. You know, you are on the road you have chosen to be on, and whether it's the right road or not, who are you to say, or who's anyone else to say? And therefore, you know, that whole being really comfortable with whatever you choose to do. And again, that whole, he talks about lots of different tools about how to change the way that you work, which I think are really helpful. That it's not about getting better at being busy. It's almost taking a step back and saying, you know, procrastination is good. You know, rephrasing how we use our time. You know, not allowing us to sort of sweep us along, and just saying, it is what it is. And I particularly like that. He used an analogy about being a river, and I often talk about that with resilience. You know, time is like a river that sweeps us along, but actually recognize you are the river, and you have to go with the flow. You know, it's not about being able to scramble onto the bank and just avoid that one. You are actually the river, and you've got that choice about how you feel comfortable with that or not. And certainly the work I've done with Kate has, over the period of time I've known her, is just so true. That whole paying attention to yourself and the do nothing meditation piece is just absolutely mind blowing.
Kate, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I have to admit, I read the book quite some time ago, but I wondered if you'd tell us about the staying on the bus. Remind us of that.
So what he says. So one of the examples is problems. So when you sit in wait for that time when there's no problems to deal with, but actually dealing with the problems is what gives life substance. So I thought that was really interesting, because I think I'm definitely guilty of thinking, oh, when am I going to not have all of these problems to deal with? But actually you learn so much from those problems, don't you? So it's, again, turning your thinking around. And then he talks also about setting time for work. So if you set yourself 50 minutes to do something, then stepping away at that point, don't push it. And the people that are most productive actually have that 50 minutes every day, or whatever it is, however they work. They're much more productive rather than just sitting there and trying to labour the point. So again, being much more mindful of your time, I guess. And what else does he say about synchronicity? I thought that was really interesting, about people walking next to each other eventually will fall into time, and then soldiers would be less fatigued because they're in time with other people, but as soon as they start doing it on their own, they get more fatigued more easily. Which I think that led me to thinking about stuff with, you know, family, and, you know, if I have communication problem with someone, I find going out for a walk with them, eventually that helps a bit further into the walk, whether that's because we've physically or mentally got in time with each other, I don't know, but wonders if that's something anybody else has thought about, that synchronicity and walking and all of that.
The walking bit definitely resonates, Sarah, and particularly with my son. If I've got a problem to talk about, I think it's part of it. It doesn't, you know, it's less confrontational when you're walking side by side. But you're right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
to step with somebody allows you to be able to just, you know, talk about things easier. I think that's right.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot to be said for the energetic field, which can't quite be replicated on screen. I do think it's possible to build community and meaningful relationships online, but there is something about being in the room and being with people that you know, maybe we've forgotten about. You know, especially, you know, where we've been since 2020. Yeah, and you know, just comes back, doesn't it, to the simple things, the really simple things. Going for a walk with a friend, without having an agenda or a to-do list for the walk, or, you know. Yeah, when you were speaking, Sarah, it reminded me. I think I was doing more. I'd heard of the Pomodoro method before I'd read this book, but actually it reminded me that if I set a timer and I know I've got to do a particular task in that time, I will complete the task and some. Or if I'm writing, I will be very focused for that amount of time. Wouldn't necessarily be 50 minutes, but I really like the idea of having that short blast of focus.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about the whole COVID period as well, and things just being a bit off kilter. So one of the things that I'm just going to read it because that I wrote down. So it was Stalin's idea to introduce the working week of 5 days. In theory, friends or family could then get the same time off to allow routine and quality time together, creating synchronization. But in reality, they were often off at different times, which caused family issues and church issues because then people couldn't go to church because they were working. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Now it's not really a 5-day week anymore. People are just working all the time. So it's really hard to find that time. I know definitely in our family, my kids both work at weekends. They're randomly at home during the week, which interrupts other work. It's really, really hard to find that balance now.
And I think maybe I'm speaking from a privileged position of being freelance. I mean, I know we all are here, but, enjoying my work so much that I don't mind. I didn't mind preparing for my mentoring session tomorrow last night on a Sunday, and that I think the word balance can be a bit of a red herring.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know how else to articulate it, but taking the flavour of what Oliver Burkeman's saying in this book and applying it so that you've got enough self-care and enough simple pleasures and you can earn a living, and not getting so, anxious about, it's Monday morning, or it's, this has to be done now because that's when it should be done, But I realise that I'm speaking probably from quite a privileged position.
Yeah. Rebecca, have you got views on that?
Yeah, so I think it's choice and intention, right? So it's I intend to do something when I intend to do it, and I have the choice. If I want to choose to do this on a Sunday afternoon, that's what I'm doing. And I think you're right. One can talk about privilege as in you don't have choice. So some people have to work all hours, have to work 2 jobs, whatever their life situation is. But if you are in a position, which there is a reasonable chunk of people that are, to make choice, I think often people don't choose to make choice. They just go with the shoulds, or whatever. And actually, going back to the point that Alyson made earlier about settling, what I really liked about that bit, I think it was that bit, is when he talked about the idea of fantasy. So it's much better to live in a world of a fantasy of like, I'm gonna write a book, or I'm gonna learn to speak Spanish, or I'm going to run a marathon. And it's much easier as a human to live in a world where you're going to do that, and that's going to be a reality because you can play out the whole thing working perfectly. Then as soon as the second you decide to take some action, you've not done it, you've not completed it, you're not doing it well, and all the rest of it. And I think there is a huge element to people complaining about things in their life that they think they don't have choice over because it's easier to live in the fantasy. I remember quite distinctly when I worked in the corporate world, a lot of people complaining about not getting on the property ladder. And granted, I lived in London and it was very expensive, but I knew some of these people who are complaining roughly what their bonuses were. And I was like, you just save up 3 of those and that's your deposit. So I don't know what you're complaining about. But of course, it's easier to live in the fantasy of I can't because it's too expensive, or I will one day, or when the world changes in my favor, blah blah blah. So I think certainly a very pivotal moment in my life is when I decided to choose my choices. And the second you face up to that, and say, I'm choosing this, I chose this, the reason I'm in this situation in large part is because of my choices, you then are open to making new choices. But until you get to that point of recognizing you chose it, and then, it's like the whole until you admit you're an alcoholic, you can't do anything about it, sort of thing. I think a lot of people get stuck in that. They don't know about this intention thing. They don't know about their ability to choose a different life, and all the rest of it. And granted, I completely take the point of privilege and what have you, but I still think everyone has room, no matter where you are. So I thought that's another thing that the book really reinforced for me. remember, you choose your choices. Choose wisely, but do choose. If you don't choose, that's also choosing.
If you don't change it, you're choosing it. As you're speaking, Rebecca, I don't know if you've read much of Viktor Frankl, but it reminds me that actually privilege doesn't necessarily come into the element of choice. So he was a psychologist and he survived Auschwitz, and he's written several books, but one of his main messages was we always have a choice, even if it's choosing how we respond to a situation. And, you know, he says in his books, they could never take away from me my inner world, my storyline, my ability to choose to respond however I want to. They can never take that away from me. You know, it's incredible. His writing is incredible.
Very powerful. Yeah. There was a question in the book about something about what's holding you back, and I talk about that quite a lot with clients. You know, how would you spend your days differently if you could, you know, if you didn't care so much about what you're supposed to be doing? You know, and I often say that to clients, you know, if money were no object, what would you do? You always get a very different answer to the one they think they should be doing. And I think, you know, what the book does is give you that permission to think very differently, which, you know, Rebecca said initially is one of the things she loved about it, is it's quite freeing in that sense.
Yeah,
definitely. So who should read this book then, Rebecca?
I think anyone, right? Like, no matter how many weeks you've got. I think almost don't think of it as it's funny because, like you say, I can see how people would see that as a negative, but it's the other whole chunk of the book, which what we talked about, is this idea I thought was brilliant. Will heaven be boring? So this idea that if you did have infinite time, it wouldn't matter what choices you made because you can just choose that other choice tomorrow. So if you had infinite life, you could do every career that you could think of, right? You could write every book that you could think of, but you'd never start anything because you've always got a million tomorrows, or a billion zillion tomorrows. So this idea that heaven might be boring because essentially, you know, whether you believe in it or not, blah, 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 theoretically it's an infinite forever time, right? I thought that was really interesting as well. And so my attitude when I heard how many weeks were you know, and of course everyone does the mental calculation of how many weeks are left, was almost like, how can I make each week count? You know, how can I have that, you know, that's how many Mondays I've got, that's how many Tuesdays I've got. So for me, it's like, if you are, anyone should read it, but especially if you feel like your life is passing you by. And maybe it'll take you, you know, like you say, maybe people get knocked on the wrong path before they then go on the right path. But, you know, for me specifically, it felt like it went, oh, good, I do have control of this, as opposed to I don't have control. I just need to be mindful, intentional, and choose my choices, and then I'm in a good place. Is how I took it.
Yeah. And Kate, would you recommend the book to your clients that you work with?
Yeah, and actually I have, and a few of them said, oh yes, I've read that, and I'm going to be reading his next one. And funnily enough, several people have come to me when they've been diagnosed with really serious, you know, stage 4 cancers and that kind of thing, and maybe they've realised, oh, my time is now, you know, much more front of mind of how much is left. I don't know how much is left, but I really realise that there's maybe a shorter amount left. And many of the themes in this book, you know, I'm working with them about present moment awareness, about this, you know, the to-do lists and how we use our time. And so I think it's a very valuable book for everyone. Maybe it's a shame he called it 4,000 weeks, because I think it puts people off when they realise that's the premise of the book. They're frightened and they're not going to read it.
Yeah, that's true. Alyson, do you think that as well? Do you think that maybe a change of name would be good?
Yeah, I do. I do think that. And I think that's the bit in the beginning that you have to get over, as we've already said. Because it says on the back of the book, and I was just looking at it, that it's uplifting, engrossing, and deeply realistic in how we face the finite amount of time. And you think, yeah, okay. But it does also say this book is wonderful. And I think, you know, like any of the things we read, we take what we need from it. There's a few, particularly in the back of the book, there's quite a few tools. So he doesn't just talk about, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other. He does give you some things around, and we've talked about a few of them. Not adopting having a fixed volume of productivity, saying I'm going to do 10 things, and then when I delete something, I'll put something else on the list. Not having an infinite list, and time boundaries that you mentioned, and the time to do nothing, which again fits what Kate said. And Kate uses a phrase, and I don't know whether it came out of the book, Kate, and I need to ask you, when he talks about scheduling meetings with yourself.
Appointments with yourself. No, I got that from somewhere else, but I like the concept.
Yeah, the scheduling meetings with yourself. I've got a post-it note that's stuck on my wall that's schedule time with myself. Shame that I have to remind myself to do it, but yeah, it works.
Yeah. So just finish with kind of one key message that came from the book for you. So Alyson, anything you can think of?
I think the whole choice thing really is my thing. We are a limited human, and we have to make choices and be comfortable making them, and like I say, truly making the right choice. Focus on the things that are right for you, not what could have been or should have been.
Yeah. Kate?
Totally. And to keep it simple, to as far as possible be present for every moment, and that's how life doesn't pass you by.
Yeah. Rebecca?
Yeah, ditto plus intention. So the message, life is attention. So whatever you pay attention to, so ensure you intend to pay attention to the right things, and your life will change overnight, even though it's the actual events in your life haven't. Your perception of it has. That's huge.
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the things that I've just seen on my list of things I was going to talk about was decide on which things you will fail on, which I think that's something that I would like to think about a bit more, actually, because I know I'm rubbish at accepting I won't be able to do something. So I think that's a good point for me. Okay, so I'm assuming we'll probably be back in about 6 weeks or so. So you're hidden again, Kate, and maybe talking about the unexpected joy of being ordinary. So thank you if anyone has been watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.